Welcome everyone. My name is Danny Storlien. I'm the girls director of coaching at Minnesota Thunder Academy. Thanks for joining us tonight in our college recruiting webinar. We're fortunate enough to have Erin Chastain, the University of Minnesota women's soccer coach, here with us tonight. So she's going to hopefully provide us with some valuable knowledge and information to help us in the college recruiting process. The nice thing at MTA is we do have a lot of our older coaches who have a lot of experience with the college recruiting process. But I think this is the second time, Erin, that we've done this. Is that right? Or third?
Yeah,
second?
I think second.
Second time Zoom that we've done it. But Erin and I go way back to her. I watched her as a Gopher women's soccer fan back in the day. She was a Gopher three-time captain. Is that right? For the
Yeah.
Gophers?
I guess that 1 year I just didn't make the cut.
Didn't make the cut 1 year. But from Wayzata High School, so right here, homegrown player, and then went and coached all over the country, California, Colorado, maybe, is that right or no? California?
Nope, Santa Clara, Northwestern, and then DePaul. Yeah.
Okay. And then this will be what, season 3 now?
Yeah, we'll be going in. We just finished season 2. So I've been at Minnesota about 1.5 years.
So season 3 coming up?
Yeah, coming up next fall.
So anyways, with that, just some maintenance things here, housekeeping for you on the Zoom call. If you've got a question or something, put it in the Q&A. Don't put it in the chat for us, please. And I'll try to monitor that. We're gonna just kind of have Erin tell us a few stories and about herself and her journey and what it's like to be recruited, and even some things with right fit and that kind of stuff. So we'll go through some back and forth with Erin and I here, but at any point, if you got a question, put it in the Q&A and we'll try to get to it at the end. We'll certainly have a lot of time for questions and all that stuff. So we'll get started here. Erin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your experience as a youth player from club and high school and getting yourself to the University of Minnesota. I know things have certainly changed and from the time when you were a player, but some of it still is kind of the same too.
Yeah, I think what's changed the most is probably now there's even more opportunities for young women to play collegiately from at any level. And then the timeline has obviously changed because when I was recruited, it was your senior year in high school. You were taking official visits and making college decisions. So I think, as a youth player, when I took my visits, I think I took 4 of my 5 official visits and looked at different, I looked at UVA and BC and Minnesota, and then ended up coming to the Gophers and had a wonderful experience, and then have been lucky enough to kind of stay involved in the game and got an early opportunity to coach at Northwestern, and then went to Santa Clara. And then obviously now I'm coaching in my dream job at Minnesota. So I think feel really fortunate to be here. And excited to talk to your club about recruiting. And there are so many opportunities, and you kind of mentioned fit. And I think that's the biggest advice I can give to young people is make sure you look at all your options and find the best fit for you. And that's going to be different for everyone. And your timing is going to be different. There's going to be early decisions and mid-year decisions and later decisions, and operate on your own timeline and make sure you do your due diligence so that you feel like, oh gosh, we have all the information we need to make a really informed decision about where we're going to go. And now with the transfer portal, I think what I've seen is, obviously those rates are so high. And I think people feel like, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, we can just transfer. And yes, that is there for people. But I think there are a lot of players that go into the portal and they don't end up finding a spot. So that's why your homework on the front end, just to, and you're always going to have a situation where hey, maybe it doesn't work out like you thought it would. And then transferring is that option. But if the more you can do on the front end and the more informed you can be, I think the better.
I'm sure we've got a lot of younger players on this Zoom tonight. Starting out age, contacting schools, kind of like a timeline for let's say 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, I'm willing to bet that's a large percentage of our people that are on the Zoom today.
Yeah, and I think, I think 8th and 9th grade is probably when you would start maybe reaching out to schools and expressing, hey, I'm a player. I play for MTA. Here's my schedule at an upcoming event, and I'm interested potentially in your school. And I don't think it has to be a ton of reach out in 8th grade. I think as college coaches, we're probably focused on like 9th and 10th grade in terms of evals. Although sometimes we'll see an 8th grader that's playing up with an older age group because of birth year. And that's really when that contact and relationship can start. We can't respond to those emails that we get. The only thing we can do is invite players to ID camps, which we can talk about at some point, how important are ID camps. But so 8th, 9th grade, I think is a good time to just start start reaching out and looking at schools and saying, yeah, I could be interested, and not really ruling anything out unless I guess you're absolutely 100% sure you don't want to be in an area of the country, or you absolutely only want to look at Division I and not Division II or something like that.
Okay. You mentioned college ID camps. Give us kind of your thoughts on that.
Well, one, like I said, that can be our response when we get an email. All we're allowed to do is say, thank you for your email and your interest. We'd love to invite you to an ID camp. So a lot of coaches send those to make sure the players know that we are interested in them, because that's all we can send. Does that mean you need to attend every ID camp absolutely not. I think ID camps are great to maybe give you a feel for a campus, give you a feel for a coaching staff, give you a feel for what the team culture is like, because a lot of times programs have their players working the camp. But it's not the end all be all. I think, again, it's just gives the client more information about a school and what kind of fit it could be for you. So I think certainly valuable to maybe attend, especially if you're really interested in a school and you get that kind of personal connection, maybe with a head coach or an assistant coach. But also do your homework on the ID camps. How many players do they cap it at? Is their whole staff going to be working the camp? Are you going to get at least the opportunity to have some interaction with the staff? Or is it 150 people and you're just one of those 150? I think that's some of the work you can do on the front end to make sure the experience is what you want out of it. And then as coaches for ID camps, certainly we get to see someone train and compete, and we get to give them information, and how do they receive that information, and how do they then apply that information? And so that's nice for us to be able to do. And then we go watch your club games, and luckily, you guys go to all the events we're at. And so I think that exposure is the most important piece of the recruiting process, because that's going to be the most competitive environment we see a young woman in. And that'll be the biggest piece for us, along with kind of the interaction in our training environment.
You mentioned fit earlier. Can you talk about right fit? I know that every school's got players that it's home run, it's the best fit ever, and some places where it doesn't quite work out, and that's why there's so many young student athletes that are in the transfer portal in all sports, but especially women's soccer seems to be one of the higher ones percentage wise. Can you just speak a little bit about the fit and all that?
Yeah, I think it's really important, one, having an idea of if you want to be close to home or farther away, or what your comfort level with that distance is. Is it easy to get back and forth over holidays? So, kind of trying to narrow that down. How big is the roster at the school? Is it a really large roster, or a medium, or a small? And will you have opportunity to go in and play as a freshman, or will it look more like, hey, I'm going to develop for a couple of years and maybe look to have an impact in my junior year? And then how does that fit in with your goals and the role that you want to have within a team? And I think that's the piece. We can all have dreams of where we want to go, and you might get the opportunity to go there. But then what is your role going to be when you are there? And is that allow you to achieve your individual goals? And I think that's a big part of fit. I think, obviously you have players that play a lot of minutes and have a big role within your team, and then to go and to not have a big role, I think is a really hard transition for competitive athletes. So I think just recognizing what your ability to handle something like that would be, and then balancing that with, hey, I like this conference. I like the academic experience that I'll have at this school. Maybe see, what other players from your club, what schools are they going to, and what experience do they have at those schools with those coaches, and within the team culture. And that's the piece where getting on campus can be valuable, because you are meeting players on the team and getting a feel for what characteristics they have and how you fit into that. Is it a team that parties a lot and you don't party at all? That's probably not a good fit. That's something that you can find out going on campus. And I think, again, the more homework you can do on that, the better. And then recognizing there are wonderful opportunities at all different levels to play. And so, I think we actually had a 5th year this year that came from a Division III program. And she was a very competitive player, played at Eclipse in Illinois. So, a club you face a lot, and just really wanted the academic experience that WashU offered. And so she chose WashU, was an All-American, won a national championship, and then did her 5th year with us. And had she started for us. She was a stud. So I think, again, she knew what she wanted her fit to be academically. And so she chose her school based on that. So again, I think it can seem overwhelming, but you guys travel a lot for club and have opportunities to see campuses, and you have good relationships with a lot of the coaches across the country since you've been doing this about as long as I have. So I think, those pieces are going to be really important tidbits for them to pick up along the way.
Couple of things, your personal experience as a player. I know that's maybe a good example. Like, why did you choose Minnesota over like Virginia, for example, when we're talking about fit and all of that?
Yeah, I think when I was being recruited, I went out to UVA on a visit, and I liked a lot. I liked the academic piece there. They were a really good program. And Minnesota, when I went there, it was the first year it was Division I. So I think the opportunity for me to have an impact right away and help start a program and build a program was really exciting to me. And I think when it came down to it, I felt like, for me, home felt good and felt right. And, I think the morning I decided, I remember waking up, and I think we all have these gut feelings and intuitions. And I just remember waking up and that Minnesota feeling right to me. And no one can tell you what the right fit is. You have to make that choice by yourself, and you can take feedback from your parents and kind of your key influencers that you have, your coaches, and they can give you their opinion, but you really know what's right and what you want. And I think the more you can follow that, the better. But so I think for me, I chose Minnesota, didn't look back, had a wonderful experience. And part of the reason I got into coaching was because of the collegiate experience that I had, and how I, felt like, wow, building that for young women would be just a wonderful path for me. And staying in soccer, something that I love and have dedicated my life to, was really exciting. So I think, yeah, all in all, I think that was a win for me.
We've had a lot of kids go to Division III schools that could have gone to ones, and they wanted to go for, as you mentioned, the academic experience, or even, like they've always played, they've always started, they've always had a big role, and maybe going to a Power 5, that wouldn't be the case, but going to a Division III, they started from day one and they were all everything and won a national championship or went deep in the playoffs, and just, back to experience and fit, different for each one.
Yeah. And again, I think it's what are you looking for? And you even look at Mankato has a player, Jenny Vetter, who was an All-American for them, and she's now in the Houston Dash training camp for the NWSL. So again, there's lots of great soccer out there, and it's just about finding the level that fits you best, and then it's going to be up to you to make, to reach your potential and to put the work in and to achieve your goals. And so I think you can do that at a lot of places as long as you're all in where you choose.
You mentioned key influencers, and obviously parents are the number one influencer, and the players should be, right? What role do they have in the recruiting process? What advice can you give to the parents, since obviously they're the most important influencers in their child's life? What role, what should they be doing, that kind of stuff?
Well, I think, number one, support your child and be their biggest fan, and make sure they know that you're going to support the path that they want to take. And really, the player has to drive the process. I think a player-driven recruiting process will be the most successful process, because that means your daughter will make their choice where they want to be. And again, so what can parents do? Well, I think stay on your kids to make sure they're checking the boxes of what they need to do to stay on top of their recruiting. So that's, sending their schedules out before events and follow up, and making sure that they're responsive to coaches once we can start kind of emailing back and forth. So good reminders from parents are always good. And then I think just, challenge them with questions, challenge them with like, well, what role do you want to have, and help them define that for themselves. Because again, I think it is about fit. And, if your daughter doesn't start for her club team, but she wants to go to North Carolina, that has to be an honest conversation of, hey, we can put that on the list, but that might be a little out of reach right now. That's not to say it couldn't happen in the future, and we'll put it on there, but let's also add some middle schools where we feel like that's a little more realistic. We want, I'm a parent, we want our kids to dream, and we want them to dream big, and we don't want to shut down a dream, but we also want to make sure that they're going to have options, and they're going to have good options. And hopefully as they go through their process and you help them define their role of, gosh, I starting is really important to me. I want to start where I decide to go. Okay, well, then you can help them kind of select those schools. And that's where a club coach can be really, really helpful also, because you've seen teams play, you've seen players go to a lot of different level programs, and I think know who can be successful where. None of us can know 100%, but I think we have a lot of background information to be able to guide in a really helpful way. And so I think, the other piece I will say for parents and for players is just being willing to listen to that guiding of, hey, like that would be really tough for you. Add some of these schools, and not taking that personally, because at the end of the day, you're trying to help an athlete find a 4-year home. And so the more information they have, again, the more successful that 4 years will be for them.
Sure. It's any like pitfalls? Oh my goodness, mom and dad, don't do this. This is like red flag. College coaches are like, oh boy. Do you have any like those couple of things like, don't do this, this isn't a good idea, moms and dads?
Well, I mean, I think the players should be emailing, not the parents. So I think when I can tell when parents wrote an email and when players wrote an email. So I think just the more, again, they can drive the process. And then when you start visiting campuses and have interactions with coaches, what's really important to me is that the young woman I'm talking to speaks for herself and has questions and looks at me in the eye. And so I think making sure they help prepare their child, and then they're in the background. And, you're on a visit. That doesn't mean don't ask any questions. It just means be in the background. Let your daughter drive the process. And then, hey, chime in because she forgot to ask 1 or 2 of the things that you had discussed. But again, you're a supporting role, and we all want young women who are really capable of speaking for themselves. And that's just a life skill we want our children to have. So I think making sure that as a parent, you're in that supporting role, that's great. And then I'd just say, we do a lot of homework on the players that we recruit. And I think if I'm at games, we know what sideline is what and where parents are. And is there someone yelling at their daughter? Is there someone maybe not being just a great role model or supporter? I think that's a factor for sure. I mean, that for me is the biggest red flag of a really loud parent that's on the ref, that's on the coach, or that's on their kid or on another kid. Again, I think it's hard because we're competitive and we want to win and we want our kids' experience to be really good and we want them to do well and them to show well, but we gotta do it the right way.
Sure. Recruiting services. How do you guys use them? Don't use them?
We don't.
Common, I think, for Power 5 schools.
Probably. I mean, I got an email from a recruiting service about a kid that they just raved about. And we happened to see that kid play at like an ID day this weekend down in Illinois. And I was like, how is this email about this kid? It's just, you don't know where the information is coming from. And, again, your club, you are so widely seen by so many different levels of college coaches. And that in-person eval is going to be the most important piece for any college coach. So I think, and then you do other things like ID days or ID camps. And so there's so many opportunities for us to see your players that I think a recruiting service is just an extra thing that's costing money for not really a lot of end product. I would recommend that for maybe someone that doesn't travel to big events and doesn't play in the competitive league that you play in. And so I think it's a little bit unnecessary. Certainly, people are going to make their own decisions, but I think you got a good gig here with the ECNL and everything you guys go to, and then everything local that you hit also.
Yeah, and our NPL teams were in Las Vegas this week, and they had a ton of people out there too. So it was great, get in front of people. Along those lines, we get a lot of video like, hey, we're moving to the Twin Cities and we heard MTA's a great soccer club and here's a video and we're going to come try out and all this stuff. I watched a lot of video during the pandemic with, all the time that we had on players and different things. Where are you guys at with recruiting when it comes to full game video, highlight video, no video, rather see them in person? Like where are you at with some of that stuff? We have to spend a lot of time on, chopping stuff up and, which is super cool. You got all these highlights and stuff for, hey, I can show my kids in 25 years and things like that is super cool. But like, where does it fit into the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, maybe a little 2-minute intro video is sometimes fine, just to say like, hey, put me on your list, but I would never recruit someone off a video. I think it's really hard to tell the level of team they're playing, where the clips are from. I think the only piece that we really like now is that some of the games you guys play are streamed. And so sometimes we can just like log in and watch a streamed NPL game or ECNL game or tournament game. And so we would use that as a recruiting tool for sure. But again, we have the ability to see your players so often that for us, that in-person eval is really just a better eval. I think anytime you can do it in person, it's better. So, and then say you're looking at a school that's far away, that doesn't see your club, that's where that video might be more helpful. And I would say it should be a full game, because I think, again, if you clip it out, we don't know what were your moments that you need to grow in. And, you're just putting highlights and we don't get a feel for the flow of a game. So I would say a full game for teams or for schools that maybe you don't come across as much. I'm trying to think of like who, I don't know, say you're interested in Montana and Montana just doesn't see your club as much. I think that could be a good tool in that situation.
The video, the highlights, I had a friend of mine who's a president in a different state association, and I had seen his daughter play a couple of times. And then he sent me, it's like, hey, can you take a look at her highlight thing? And he's a super good friend of mine. So I didn't say this to his daughter, obviously, but I'm like, I wouldn't send that to anyone. She looks better in person than she did playing in these moments that are chopped up, these highlights and that kind of stuff. I've only really seen one kid where I thought their video matched with the quality of that player. When they sent me their highlight video, I was like, all right, this matches where she's at. This is really good. The other one's like, she's better in person.
Yeah.
Better in a full game than in some of the video highlights. But
yeah, and especially the quality of the video matters. And, is it like running at the right speed? And so I think there's just a lot of things that could go wrong with it that, you can't rely on that.
And it's fun to have the video, and I wish we had the time to break down games like you do in college and look at film. And we don't know, we got these teams we're playing coming up in Florida this weekend, for example. We know so little about those teams, and, to try to get video and sit down and look at it on those teams, like you guys have video on all your opponents, where at club and high school, you really don't.
I know it's a lot harder. I mean, we obviously, it's very widely available for us. So I think we use video a lot for our team.
Sure. Oh, it makes sense. And I think if we had the time, and didn't have to have everybody drive in for another session and watch film from a game. And, it's hard to do. Some of our coaches do some stuff online, which is really good, but more for the recruiting part of it. I was just curious where, with some of the either highlight film or a full game or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, full game for sure. If they feel the need to have that as a supplement in their recruiting process, in addition to just going to tournaments and their league games.
Yeah, we're certainly fortunate that a lot of people get to see our players play. And I mean, that's number one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about incoming players that show up on campus and things that you consistently see with new players, freshman players into your program that like, wow, they're lacking in this or that? Is there a common thing that, all right, they went from being a high school senior to a college freshman, and what are some things maybe even us as coaches or a club could do to help prepare them to be more successful their freshman year?
Well, I think speed of play is usually the biggest piece that we see. Gosh, you just got to play faster. You have to know what you want to do with the ball faster, because everyone is a little bit faster and a little bit better, and you're playing really good teams. And so that speed of play piece. And then a lot of times the fitness component, they're just not totally ready for that piece. So I think just control the controllables. So control your strength and your fitness. And I will also say a lot of times with the timeline of recruiting, players are deciding junior year, and then you're finding in that senior year prior to when they get to us, it's maybe less players at practice or less players attending events. And they're just I wouldn't say checked out, but they're like, oh, I got my goal. I made it to a Division I school, or I made it to my Division III school, and I'm set. And they miss out on that chunk of development and chunk of growth that they could be having if they maintained that same commitment they had the year prior. So certainly we all need balance, but I think just continuing to be driven and wanting to achieve, and recognizing that even though you've made a college decision, now the work really starts. And what are you going to do to prepare yourself to have the role that you do want to have once you get there? And so I think, again, the more they can be fit and ready, and then focusing on speed of play and making sure that they have the right preparation in that year and summer prior to getting to a school, is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be your toughest year of soccer in your life is your freshman year in college, where you're playing against people that are 2 and 3, and even now 4+ years with more experience, because people have an extra year, some of them with the COVID stuff, and you're just playing against players that have all that extra experience, and it's hard to make up for that if you're not really working hard the last 6-8 months before you go to college.
Well, and soccer is unique in that we kick off before anyone else on campus in August. So really we have that 2-week preseason period, and then you have a game. And so if you're not ready in that period, the season is 3 months long, and you don't really have enough time to make up for the fact that you weren't ready. So your freshman year becomes a wash. Whereas if you look at basketball and softball, freshmen going in have this whole 3, 4, 5 month period of preparation with their new group where they can kind of transition, get used to speed of play or difference in fitness expectations. And so I think that piece being unique to soccer, that preparation piece is really, really important.
Players that, and I feel like this is across the board kind of question, not University of Minnesota, but like, what are college coaches looking for in players? I'm out there recruiting. I'm a college coach. I'm watching these games. What are like the few things that really looking for in someone that we want to be a Gopher or wherever, a Tommy, a Badger, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think I talk about, the physical piece, the psychological piece, the technical and the tactical. And so physical is obviously the speed and quickness and what kind of athlete are you? And so that's obviously going to be important at a Division I level. The technical piece is, are you able to keep the ball? What's your range of passing? How do you receive? The tactical piece is just overall soccer IQ. And then the psychological piece, which I think is almost the most important, are those mental pieces of how driven are you? How focused are you? How resilient are you? How do you handle things in a game when your team's down 1-0? Do you then get quieter, or do you try to make an impact? How do you handle maybe making an error on the field? How are you a leader? So those are some of the psychological pieces that I think we look for. And then obviously we're looking at different positions and where players could fit in with our teams and what role they would have on our team. But certainly those are some of the things that we're looking for. And, I think that's why we try to watch players in training environments and in games and game environments. Are they training with the same mentality that they play with on game day? Because obviously we train a lot through the year, and a key to development is what you're willing to put in on the training grounds. So I think those are probably a couple of things that we look for specifically.
Do you guys have people that do sports psychology stuff with your athletes at the university? We did as we were talking about prior to everyone getting on here, we had a little psychology session on Wednesday about confidence and self-confidence and that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's the area, we're the same with the 4 pillars: the psychological, technical, tactical, physical, those 4 areas, we talk about all the time. And I think the area that might be the most important, as you mentioned, is the psychology piece. And it's the piece that we probably do the least with and that we know the least about. And it's the most important. It doesn't make any sense, but it is what it is. It's sad that we don't do more as a club, and we're trying to do more. So we're trying to take that part on with us as a club. And, you don't get it at high school. You don't get it at most clubs, and just trying to find a way to do more with that for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great that you had a session on that, because I think, again, it's just that's a part of performance. That's performance enhancement, and certainly a very overlooked area, especially in today's youth and the youth that went through a pandemic. And it's just a different generation of young people with social media. And, you can play a game and you can put your goal that you scored on your Instagram, like right away. And so what if you didn't score the goal, then you see the teammate put, and how do you handle that piece from a confidence perspective? And so I think there's just so much more out there that youth are dealing with, that tool is really important. We have that, thankfully, at Minnesota, to work with individuals or teams, and we have a lot of nice resources. And I think because of its importance, and so our team will spend a big chunk of the year kind of delving into different topics weekly that can contribute to our players' overall growth and development.
Sure. That's great. Like I said, we're trying to do more at the club level, and we're not a university that has a nutritionist and a psychologist and a tutor and you go down the list and you got 4 coaches at training or whatever. And a lot of times we've got one coach and they're warming up the goalkeeper and doing everything, but we're trying to do better with the psychology piece for sure. We think
That's great. And I think it's great you even did a session. I mean, I think that's important, and hopefully people that couldn't make the session can like listen to it on a recording or something, because again, those tools are really valuable.
Yeah, I think we're moving forward. We're going to do, I don't know what it's going to be exactly, look like one every other month or something where we've got these different individuals that come in, and maybe we can do them in person because sometimes that's a little more valuable. But the session I thought was really good on Wednesday. Somebody asked a question as we were talking about what you're looking for in players, and I know it's similar to a goalkeeper, but their specific question was, what are you looking for in a goalkeeper versus, an outfield player?
Yeah. So goalkeepers, I mean, I think a lot of the same, in terms of, what's their physical, obviously, I think goalkeepers come in all sizes in terms of taller and shorter. We have a couple different sizes of goalkeepers in terms of like our starting goalkeeper, I think, is 5'9". And then one of our goalkeepers coming in, I think, is 5'10". And I've had one of the best goalkeepers I ever had was at DePaul, and she was 5'8". And then you see really tall goalkeepers. So I think, again, it's, what do you do well as a goalkeeper, and making sure that always shows up. But looking for footwork, looking for controlling their box. So how are they on service? How are they organizing their group on set pieces? How is their distribution with their feet? How is their distribution with throwing? How are they in 1v1 situations? How are they in shot stopping? And then really that psychological piece. I mean, being a goalkeeper is hard, and I think can be really lonely at times. So I think, are you a leader? Do you organize your back line? Can you have short-term memory from mistakes? Goals are scored in soccer, and it doesn't always mean our goalkeeper made the error that led to the goal. It just, they have to get the ball out of the net. And how do they then recover from that? And so I think looking at some of those psychological pieces with the goalkeeping is really important. And then what's their communication? And that will be really an important piece. Do they communicate good information to their team and to their back line? And it's such an important role. And I think the more you can kind of command the group from the goalkeeping position, the better.
How many do you guys have right now? 3 or 4?
Right now, we'll have 4 in the fall, 4 goalkeepers. And that's the other piece from a recruiting perspective for a goalkeeper, just doing your homework on when their goalkeepers graduate, how many they currently have on their roster, and making sure from a fit perspective, you're going into a place where you will eventually have an opportunity, because we're not going to travel 4 goalkeepers. Usually you travel 2 goalkeepers. And so, some teams carry 5 goalkeepers. So I think just doing your homework on how many do they carry, who's the starter, what year are they, and then having a really honest conversation with the staff about where you fit into their plans for a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a top 5 player on the team, and you're going to probably find a spot for me, but if you're the second or third goalkeeper, well, you're probably not playing right back or center midfield or whatever, right? I mean, it's just a different animal, different situation.
Yeah.
All right, let's open it up for some questions here. I know we had one answered there, so thank you. The same, specific stuff here. Someone's asking about what you're looking for in a center midfield, which I think you kind of answered, but is there any real specific to
Oh,
ascend?
well, I would just say, someone who wants to be on the ball, gets on the ball a lot, knows what they want to do with it before they get it, is able to, kind of beat someone off the dribble and be a dangerous scoring threat, but also be able to make a decision about when to slip a ball, when to change the point of attack, where's our numerical advantage. Your midfielders really need to kind of have a great engine. They need to be able to be fit, cover a lot of ground, win 50-50 balls. And, we like midfielders that can change tempo of games. So they know when to slow it down. They know when to speed it up. And they really, they really kind of do the work, right? I think the best central midfielders go box to box and control the game and, probably have the most mileage in our stats after a game is our central midfielders.
That makes sense. All right, so now is a good time for those of you out there who want to put in questions in the chat. We're to that point. So 2 good questions that we've had so far. So if you've got other questions, this is certainly the time to do that. So it's not just me asking Erin all the questions, but I know some of you have questions that you probably want answered. And if you've got the question, there's probably other people that are thinking the same thing. So feel free to type it in the Q&A. I might have said chat, but if you can put it in the Q&A, that's better. So we'll give that a second. Make sure I didn't miss anyone in the chat. I don't think I did.
The other piece I can touch on a little is the new, and different from last year when we talked, is the NIL for athletes. Now athletes can make money from being sponsored by a company, and so it's a little different addition that we have in terms of, like, our athletes have done things with like a yogurt company, and then they post it on their Instagram and they make $500 for doing it or whatever the amount. So it's this new little part of especially Division I athletics. And what that also allows schools to do, it's called the Alston academic money. And so yearly we're allowed to give up to $5,980. I don't know why it's that number, but it is. So $5,980 or $5,960 for academic performance. And really it's kind of like if you're going to class and hitting, certain standards, you can get an extra $6,000 a year. So it's this amazing evolution in college athletics where student athletes just are getting a lot. And that's another piece. So those are conversations you can have in the recruiting process with, what do your athletes do for NIL? Do you support and give that Alston money? Because not every school does it. We're just allowed to. So those are just some extra, obviously, in addition to scholarship, extra funds that student athletes would be able to take advantage of at different schools.
Do you have some athletes that are on academic money and athletic money?
We do. We have a lot of them are on a combination. Usually we can get a read prior to like them committing to our school. We can run their transcript through our academic aid and find out what they would qualify for. Then you can usually stack that with athletic aid so that they end up at a total package. So that's most Division I schools. I would say Division III doesn't do athletic scholarships. So that's, need-based aid and potential merit-based aid. And then Division II does do athletic scholarships. So just some other pieces. And the Ivy League doesn't do athletic scholarships. And I don't think they do merit-based either, because everyone that goes there is pretty smart. So I think they do just need-based at the Ivies.
And back to your control the controllables, your academic success certainly is part of the whole process, and whether you get money or you're a student athlete first, right? So
you really are. And I think that, those habits that you pick up through high school of just paying attention to the details of your courses and your academics and caring and being driven about your academic performance, I think that matters, and that gives you more options in the recruiting process, and certainly helps mom and dad if you get a merit-based athletic or academic scholarship that you can maybe combine with an athletic, or even if you just get merit-based. I think it's just extra help for how much college costs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys have a really high team GPA, right?
We do. I think it was 3.56 this
Wow.
past semester. So they're, I think in women's soccer in general, I would define the culture being, high achievers on the field and academically. And so I think it's nice to be able to give them an academic experience where it pushes them and prepares them for life after graduation. And they're really excited about the classes they take and doing well in those classes.
That's great. All right, here's a question. Do all colleges have a recruiting coordinator? Should we reach out to those coordinators or the coaches directly?
So they don't. A lot of staffs will have someone in charge of recruiting on like one of the assistant coaches, but some staffs term that person as the recruiting coordinator. So if they do have that position, absolutely directly reach out to that person with your schedule. But I would also copy their staff, just because you never know what gets missed or what does, and you want to make sure you're on a spreadsheet prior to an event so that we come watch you play. So I always think more reach out is better in terms of making sure you know who to address the email to, but certainly the recruiting coordinator kind of organizes all the recruiting for that program. So making sure they're on any correspondence that you have, but not everyone has that. We don't have someone called the recruiting coordinator, but both of my assistants handle different parts of recruiting.
Sure. And you're getting hundreds, thousands, depending on the time frame, emails from players at any given point before a big event. Phoenix coming up in April, you'll get bombarded the last week of March, 2 weeks of March, something like that.
Yeah, we get a lot of correspondence, and we put everyone on a spreadsheet, and we do our best to see everyone at the events that we go to. You can't always see everybody, but I think again, that's another piece. You have 3 play dates usually at your events, and we might come day 1, we might come day 1 and 2. I would say the majority of coaches come for the first 2 days, not as many for that last day, but some people stay for that last day. So I think just being ready, no matter what day you're playing, what time you're playing, because we might be at the first half, we might be at the second half, and just making sure you're not stressed about it, but you're controlling your controllables so that we get a good eval of how you would help our program.
I think the showcases, there's talk now, and I think you're going to see with the showcases, a lot of people talking about it with going to a 2-day showcase, because 1, the college coaches leave on the 3rd day, and 2, the injuries are through the roof on day 3. And then you're watching somebody who played Friday, who played Saturday, and now have to perform on Sunday. Those poor kids, that's hard.
I know I remember we used to have like 2 games in one day, like back in the day, but obviously now everything's so much more specialized. So I think that's a key difference, where you're playing all year, and then, maybe it would be more competitive just to have the 2 days, and maybe the injury numbers would go down. But certainly I think those first 2 days are really key days, in terms of, just, being ready to go. And then if you're a goalkeeper and there's any way that, say you have 2 goalkeepers on your team, and I'm sure every club does it different, but if you're going to play the first half or the second half or the day 1 or day 2, that's super helpful information to put in an email, if you're a goalkeeper.
Good advice.
But you might not always know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying if you do.
For sure.
Now you're going to start getting tons of questions from goalkeepers.
It's
Can
okay.
you tell me which half I'm going to be playing?
With the showcases, we should be playing everybody at least half the game, right? At a showcase. So it's easy to do half and half. It's just nice for the coaches to know one half or the or the other half. Oh, you said something I wanted to follow up on. What was it? Give me a second. I'll remember. Oh, phone calls. People
Mhm.
calling you. So you mentioned, or I mentioned, and then you kind of said, yeah, with the whole bunch of emails and, you're getting hundreds or thousands over the course of a year from all these players. What about players calling? Do you have
Yeah, so, well, we can't talk to players until, so June 15th of this coming year, we'll be able to talk to rising juniors.
right?
And so we will directly reach out to a group of rising juniors that we've identified as, top players at that time. And then certainly I think it's good to try to set up a phone call. I think that first couple weeks is really hectic because we're calling a lot of players. And if you're not on someone's radar right away, I think following up and trying to set up a phone call at a later time is great. But I also, if you don't get the call you want on June 15th, I don't think it's like panic mode. I think there were plenty of players in this past recruiting. I called a lot on June 15th or that week, and then we added more to our list kind of throughout the whole summer. So I think we're always adding good players to the pool of players we're considering. It might just mean maybe someone was injured at an event, and then we see him at the next event. We're like, who's this kid? She's really good. She should be on our list, and we should set up a call with her. So I think not going into panic
You said
mode.
that to me before, like, who's this kid? And I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
I for sure have. Like, wait a minute, I just saw you guys.
3 months. They weren't at the last event. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just, staying persistent and consistent with communication to schools you're interested in.
Do you ever have people call you? So let's say I'm an 07, U16. Most of those are rising juniors. It's June 10th, and they reach out and call and say, hey, I'm really interested. Our 07s are going to the playoffs in San Diego. I know you can't call me back or talk to me until June 15th, but I'm leaving you a message to let you know that I'm really interested and we're playing in San Diego, and I'll follow this up with an email with our schedule, something like that. Do you have people do that? Or
I've had people do that, and I think I'm fine with that, or an email. And I think showing genuine interest is nice because I think I get a sense of, okay, they're genuine. My time is going to be well spent with this individual because they've done their homework on Minnesota and they feel like that potentially could be a realistic option for them. And so I know, like, hey, let's delve into this and see if it could be a good fit. And so I think that's sometimes nice to know someone's genuinely interested. Now, if they're doing that with 700 schools, I think they're going to overwhelm themselves. And, I think it's good for the select few that you're really interested in.
Sure. All right, we're nearing the end here. We want to respect everyone's time. We've got a few more minutes here. It's almost 8 o'clock. Are there any other questions that people have? You can put them in the chat now, and we can try to get to a couple of those before we end the Zoom call here in just a couple of minutes. Erin, how many MTA players playing for the Gophers now? 9? I'm just guessing.
Ooh, I don't know. A lot.
I got you on one.
A lot. I have to count in my head, and we have a bunch coming in too. So are you counting those?
Sure. How many will be on the roster when I'm at a game in August, September, October, November,
7,
hopefully December?
8. I think you're right. I think 8 or 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
I know. They're
And
great.
your roster size this year will be?
It'll be 28.
28.
So I think rosters vary. 24 is probably the low end. 35 is probably the high end. And there are teams that carry 35. So I think that's the piece I touched on earlier. Just do your research and figure out what's their average roster size and what kind of experience are you looking for? Because that's going to be different for everybody. But we'll be at 28. And that's probably my ideal is like 26 to 28, I would say, just personally.
Sure. You want to have enough to be able to play 11 aside.
Yeah, for training. And then you know, you want to be able to coach everyone and help them reach their potential. And just, I think those pieces are really, really important, and making sure they feel a part of the program and that they have opportunity and they're a big part of the culture. And so that's the number we've identified that works for us.
We've had some players that have gone to schools with big rosters and, you know, it wasn't maybe the right fit for them because they wanted to play more. And some of these places, they did a pretty nice job of getting people into the game. But, you know, we've got teams with 18 and I'm going, boy, this is tricky with 18, let alone 25 or 30 or 35 or whatever. You know, it's not easy always.
Well, they might not even be making it into like the 11v11 in practice. So I think
Right.
it's challenging. And again, maybe that works for some programs and they have a unique way of doing it. And that's where you just have to ask questions.
Well, Erin, we're at 8 here. I really appreciate it. This is always awesome, and it's nice to see you. And I thank you for taking the time to help our student athletes out here. And we'll see you Arizona for sure, right?
Arizona for sure. Yeah, but we'll be at a lot. We'll see.
Yeah.
We see those teams a lot. So
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Awesome job as always. I hope we can make this a annual tradition.
absolutely. Thanks, Danny.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.